Thank you so much, Kayla. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily, where we do just about 30 minutes of business before we'll hand you back to Kayla and Ayo to continue on the Sunrise Daily studio. We start as usual from the global space, where oil prices gained on Thursday as crude stocks fell after United States refineries ramped up processing and as gasoline inventories eased, signaling stronger demand. Take a look at the numbers here. It's a very different, well, not very different, but a sharp movement we've seen compared to what we had this time yesterday. Yes, it went up 0.73%. That's for Brent, $85.70 a barrel. And also WTI went up same proportion, $82.70. And this is because of U.S. crude inventories. It fell 3.4 million barrels to 445.1 million barrels in the week ended July 5, and the analysts had expected, it's more than what they had expected. They expected about 1.3 million barrels. So look at what this has done. Expectation against reality. Gasoline stocks also fell by 2 million barrels to 229.7 million barrels. That's much bigger than the 600,000 barrels draw that analysts had expected during that July holiday week in the United States. Now, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries also stuck to its forecast for relatively stronger growth in global oil demand this year, 2024, and next year, 2025, saying that resilient economic growth and air travel would support fuel use in the summer months. And talking about OPEC now, their monthly oil market report for Nigeria shows an increase in our production, 1.27. There you have it. Nigeria's average daily crude oil production increased to 1.27 million barrels. Don't you just wish it was 2 points? But we had expected about 1.4, as promised by Ms. Amelia Kieri of the NNPCL. I guess we still have to wait for those days, especially now that our crude is being squeezed. Remember that story about NNPCL, a new loan of about $2 billion? Well, they said it's not been officially announced yet. Well, I guess we just keep our fingers crossed for that official announcement. But so far, it does look like our supply of crude is getting really squeezed with the loan, crude-backed loans, which is becoming even more rampant in the country. Now we look at the Naira now, see how it's doing. There was an intervention by the Central Bank of Nigeria, the FX market yesterday. In spite of that, we did see a drop in the value of the Naira. It opened at 1,532 Naira, 58 kobo, but closed at 1,561 Naira, 98 kobo. That's almost 2% drop. Very heartbreaking there. Meanwhile, in NAFEX, very marginal right there. But we know this is the real number, 1,561 Naira, 98 kobo. And I did hear that in the parallel market it dropped even further. Even the pound now is about 2,000 Naira. So, and I just wonder why, in spite of the CBN's intervention, perhaps we'll feel the impact of that today. So we'll be looking at the close of the Naira today at the market. Now, one of the most interesting things going on in Nigeria now is ahead of the recapitalization of banks in the country. So we've seen that the capital market has been really busy. Access Holdings, Access Bank is one of those really busy. Shareholders of the Holdings PLC have expressed confidence in the company's growth strategy, and they've pledged their support as the group begins to raise $351 billion through rights issue from existing shareholders on the Nigerian Exchange Limited. As the NGX, Access Holding rights issue is offering 17.77 billion ordinary shares of 50 kobo each, so 19 Naira 75 kobo for a share.
The existing shareholders.
The management and board of Access Holdings PLC are seated here with the group's shareholders, stockbrokers, and investors at the Nigerian Exchange Building in Lagos. The group is undertaking a capital raising initiative of 351 billion naira through a rights issue to existing shareholders. Under these rights issues, 17.772 billion ordinary shares will be offered at 19 Naira 75 kobo per share.
Share what today has evolved to be the corporate philosophy.
In his presentation, the bank's managing director, Roosevelt Ogbonna, says the bank has the track record and now seeking to become the world's first truly African global bank.
We are the largest lender in the market, largest deposit taker. And I think the conversation would have been a bit narrow if it was just in Nigeria. Across the 14 markets we operate in the continent, we're top 5 in 10 of them. In the other 4 or 5, ex-South Africa, by 2027 will be a top 5 bank. So in some sense, we're not local champions. We're the 3rd largest bank in Zambia. Fact.
And the next phase of the bank's growth trajectory is captured in these key metrics. The bank hopes to scale up the total number of its customers to 125 million and increase the total number of its monthly active platform users to 42 million. The group's chairman tells the story behind the numbers.
If I was given the opportunity to theme our capital market raising exercises, you know what I'll call it? I'll call them promises kept. Herbert in 2018 announced that in 5 years' time, it will be top 1. And by 2022, so it was. Promises kept.
The shareholders also have words of confidence to back the exercise.
I have confidence. This right issue of 19 Naira 75 kobo is like bonus prize to us. It's part of capital appreciation by God willing. What we will just do now, we can be patient.
The management and the board of the group further reiterate their commitment to the shareholders.
We have listened to our shareholders very clearly, and we know what they are expecting from us, into the coming years. And so that's what we're going to be focused on, and that's what we're going to be executing seamlessly, going into the future.
We are now going into consolidation phase, a time when, based on the astute investments that have been made, over successive management teams, we are now about to reap the dividends of those investments. So this is the time for shareholders to really reap the rewards of their loyalty to Access Bank.
As the bank consolidates for the future, the group sets to continue to position strategically by facilitating and enhancing cross-border trade across the globe.
It's still on the floor of the NGX, where the Minister of Environment, Mr. Balarabe Abbas Lawa, rang the closing gong at the close of Wednesday's trade on that floor. The event was also the opportunity to unveil its Impact Board, a dedicated platform for listing sustainability instruments. It was the commemoration of the 8th Green Bond Advisory Group meeting, following the approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Apart from Mr. Lawal, who is the co-chair of the Green Bond Advisory Group meeting, there were other attendees, Dr. Emomotimi Agama, Director General of the SEC, alongside delegates from the Debt Management Office, the Ministry of Environment, issuers, and issuing houses.
Climate change is real. And it's not just happening in other markets or in other territories or in other countries, it's also happening in Nigeria. The need for us to begin to look at how to, keep the sustainability of this environment on the pinpoint. The government of Nigeria has always established a Ministry of Environment. And as we begin to look at renewable energy and other things that would help shape a better climate, even as we see the issues of flooding in Lagos and in other parts of the country. Funding that particular initiative is very important. And the NGX, in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Environment, is working together with issuers to see how they can raise capital in the form of sovereign green bonds to finance some of those initiatives that the Federal Ministry of Environment is trying to pursue, in line with, I think, the current government's agenda of sustainability. So Essentially, I believe there were meetings today with the NGX, the Ministry of Federal Ministry of Environment, the SEC, a few stakeholders in terms of possible issuers and advisors. And of course, that led to the closing of the market by the oil minister.
So there you have it. The floor is now open also for a green investment. So you can actually invest in project initiative that are green, that would lead that are sustainable and will lead to, better climate for the country and the environment. Now, the United States, well, not in the green this time, but giving power. I'm sure you saw that report yesterday where there was that MOU that was signed between the United States and Nigeria. They're backing the federal government's reform for the power sector with 115 billion Naira support. And so far, they've done some achievement. They call it the Power Africa program. So far, they have about 200 million people across the continent. They've helped them to get access to electricity. They have partners from the private sector, 5 million connections, which represents an upward of 20+ million people just over the last 5 years. And they also have the target of doubling access to electricity by 2030 in the country. Well, we'll talk about more of this and how they hope to achieve it this morning with Mr. Richard Nelson. Mr. Richard Nelson is right here in the studio. He's the coordinator of the United States government's Power Africa program. Mr. Nelson, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Eni. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So is this your first time in Nigeria?
It actually is my first time, yes.
So would you compare your reality in Nigeria and what you've been hearing? I know you've been just around the island and all of that, but let's hear what you have seen or felt in the country. You said you've been here for about 4 days, I believe that's what you said.
4 days. I've been in Abuja until this morning. And we've been out to see a health facility that's been electrified. We've seen a transmission center that was upgraded. We've talked to many of the government agencies involved in power and the private sector as well. So it's been a busy 4 days, and it's given me a good perspective on what's happening here.
Yeah, but you haven't seen outside work, have you?
No. No.
Sadly, I hope
no free time.
I hope you do before you leave.
That would be nice, yes.
All right, so we saw that you had that MOU signed yesterday with the Nigerian government, the Power Africa, and power obviously is a big deal for any economy that wants to develop, but it's been a big challenge for the continent. But I'll stick with Nigeria at this time. Businesses are suffering, the cost of energy is increasing, and then you now come and you say you're working with the private sector and the government. Help us to explain how you hope to implement this Power Africa program.
Great. And let me just explain a little bit about Power Africa. Power Africa is the U.S. government's initiative, as you said, to double access to electricity on the continent. And we work through partners, through private sector partners, through other development partners, and through U.S. government agencies. And so what's happening in Nigeria is many of these partners are doing work to support the power sector, whether it's in generation, distribution, transmission, all of the above. And we've been working here for the last 14 years. I should say 11 years. And this MOU is in relation to a particular project that we have that is focused on providing a lot of almost like consultancy support to the government, to the private sector, to help unlock some of these problems. And so we have advisors that are helping various agencies within the government. They're helping the private sector, the discos, to kind of navigate many of these problems. And so we're renewing that effort for the next 5 years, and that'll be an important part of our work here.
So we have a new amended electricity bill, that now allows for independent power producers and suppliers, also allows the state government to be more active. Does that fit into your vision, or how does that fit into your plan?
Yes, it absolutely does. Our plan incorporates that in terms of working with the state governments and helping them think through that process and what might be possible for them so that they really understand what they're getting into. This is a very complex business, and it's not as easy as many may think. And so we'll have people that will be working with them to help understand what these issues are. The other thing that we'll be focusing on is really the main challenge in Nigeria, which is basically the distribution system. It's the ability to transfer power to consumers, and then for consumers to pay for that power to be able to cover the costs of that electricity all the way back up the chain. And right now there's about 40% of the power that's lost in terms of what's transmitted or what's generated and then what's paid for. And no business can operate with 40% losses right off the top. So that's going to be a major part of what we're working on over the next few years to see if we can figure out how to support the government in solving that problem.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, and I guess it's also important to know that it's not just the government. Yesterday, incidentally, we had an independent power supplier standing right where you were, and he was also sharing some of the plans and hopes and prospects and all of that. And of course, you've talked about getting consumers to pay. That is a challenge. Oil theft is a challenge. Infrastructure that seems to have been ignored for many, many years is the challenge. I see that you have about 115 billion naira set out for this. Could you share with us how because as you've said, it is complicated. We've been trying to solve this problem for many years. And how do you hope to connect these seemingly unconnected or unresolvable, issues so that we can really have a lighted Nigeria?
No, thank you for that question. The key is really strong regulatory environment that is enforced. If the regulatory environment is enforced and predictable, and people are willing to pay, and by the way, if more people are paying for their power, tariffs can be lower because it spreads it out across more people, right? And so those are critical factors that have to be addressed. And when that happens, you're going to have investors who are waiting in the sidelines right now, looking at Nigeria, very interested in investing in Nigeria, but are nervous about the power sector. And when they see that more consistent, they see reliable power, they're going to be investing in much larger amounts. And so that's part of the issue here, is to help establish those frameworks that can really be respected by everyone and enforceable. And so that's where we're going to be working. And again, it's a responsibility on the private sector, on consumers, but also on the government to ensure that all those policies are clear, they're set forth in a way that people understand them, and that really forms the basis for the system.
Yeah, so I hear you. Once we deal with the regulatory environment, we're sure to attract investment, into those infrastructure and all of that. I believe that's the core.
Yeah, and let me say that we've had a very, very close relationship with the Nigerian government, the different agencies involved in the power sector. Just in the meetings I've had this week, they've been very cooperative. We have just a really good working relationship. And so I really feel hopeful that we're going to be able to support the government in its objectives to really refine that, to build on that framework, to be able to do the work that needs to be done with the discos, with the states, with the whole system, to be able to make sure it works. The other piece that we haven't talked about, though, too, is the off-grid space. There are many people around Africa and even in Nigeria who maybe not in their lifetime will be within a short distance of the grid. So they're going to need access to off-grid resources to be able to run their businesses and supply power to their homes. And so we are supporting companies in that space as well. We've been working with just under 200 of those to try and bring that type of power, really productive power, to people who will never be close to the grid.
Well, I guess we can be hopeful now,
right?
in Nigeria.
Exactly.
But how does the renewable energy plan fit into this? Because we just had a report before you came on climate change and green bonds. You know, how people should look the way of investing in green, sustainable infrastructure. And Nigeria does have a lot of sun. The independent power supplier we spoke to yesterday said they're using gas, which is rather expensive, but when you do solar, then the overhead cost or the initial overhead cost is very expensive. So what's this program doing in the area of green energy?
That's a good question. So Power Africa as an initiative is what we call an all of the above initiative. So we'll support power generation from any source because we're really after access to electricity, to reliable, affordable electricity. Because of all the innovations in the clean energy sector, you're seeing the prices go down dramatically in solar, wind, and other sources. And so right now, for a small business, for even some large businesses, if they want to have their own power supply, sometimes the solar the solar system they can purchase might actually supply power for cheaper prices. Now, in some cases, when you have a small scale, like a mini grid somewhere, the prices that people will pay there might actually be a little bit higher than what they would on the grid, just because of the economies of scale. So it can really depend on the actual situation and the market. But I can tell you this, that the renewable energy wave is exploding around the world. And I think the whole world is on a transition. And countries like yours, like the United States, with a gas supply, we're going to continue to use that to generate power and to use it for other sources. But there's a lot of momentum toward renewables, and that will continue for sure.
All right, so I mean, this sounds exciting, but I'm just curious, what does the United States get out of powering Africa?
That's a great question. It's really at the core of why we're here. The U.S. government really has a really high priority placed on Africa, on strengthening those relationships between African countries and the United States for economic reasons, for security reasons, for diplomatic reasons, many, many reasons why the United States wants to be a close friend to countries in Africa. And so we're engaging with African countries in a lot of different ways. And this particular initiative, Power, is a very, very critical piece of that because it is so necessary. In fact, I was at an event in Dallas, a U.S.-Africa Business Summit, about 2 months ago, and I met several heads of state from Africa at that event, along with a number of interagency colleagues that were with me. And Power was at the very top of their list, every single one of them. And it is clearly a concern across the continent. It's something that we feel like with our partnership approach, we can help to mobilize resources and mobilize support for that. And honestly, economic growth cannot happen without power. I think we know that, right?
Very
and
true.
so we feel like this is the fundamental way that we can interject the resources that we have to be able to support African countries in the growth that they want to achieve.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Richard Nelson, coordinator of the United States government's Power Africa program. We do wish have fun in Nigeria, but also we do wish to see the results of this, this program. We're really eager for that.
Thank you. So do I. Thank you.
All right, now we'll continue with the program in a bit after this break. Join us again. Welcome back. Still Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. We head straight to the commodity space. And we're worried about the Naira, that in spite of that intervention from the central bank yesterday, we still saw that huge depreciation on the currency. And discussing this is research manager with financial derivatives company, Dr. Ifeoma Awokolo. Dr. Awokolo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Great. So we had intervention yesterday, and yet we still had the Naira depreciating. Is there something we're missing?
From what we are seeing, you're quite correct. What we are seeing, we saw that Naira keeps depreciating and is a major concern. Because if we say we want to do a reform, the depreciation of Naira, the valuation of Naira is a major concern that is going to affect this particular plan. We see that Naira has continued to decline, even though we are having the reserve, increase in reserve of about $2.2 billion. So it simply means that the increase in the reserve we have is not strengthening the Naira yet. We are not seeing it transit into the strengthening of Naira. And the question becomes, what is really the issue? And the major concern is that there is high demand of dollar. You see, the demand of dollar is outspacing the supply of dollar. At this point in time, you see a lot of importation because Nigeria is an import-based country. So there's a lot of pressure on Naira, and this is the time importers import goods as against December. This is the time of importation. So a lot of people are scouting for dollar. Also, let's not forget that a lot of Nigerians have lost confidence in the value of Naira. A lot of people are beginning to look for an alternative currency to keep their money, which is dollar. So you see, this is what is causing this depreciation in the value of Naira. And if this happens, even though there's going to be removal of taxes and duties on staple food, that is one. The Naira devaluation is another point. When you remove taxes and levies from importation, what happens to the dollar rate? So the dollar rate is still going to filter into whatever commodity that is brought in, and we begin to see that it will seem as if nothing is done. We may not really see changes in terms of reduction in prices if the value of Naira is not appreciating.
So do you think that now, I know this is for June, our oil production that's increased by 1.6%, even though we are still not, we're still far from the 1.5, which is our target and all of that. But at least we had 1.276 yesterday. That was released by OPEC. That's our oil production. Do you think this could help?
Yeah, in a way, it could help. You just saw a 1 point. It's just a minimal increase, 0.14% increase. So it's going to help in the sense that our major importation earnings is from crude oil. So when we do this, we are going to see it's going to be a plus for us in terms of our reserve and in terms of FX into the economy. It's going to go a long way as well. But even at that, we have not been able to meet our target of 1.5 in OPEC. So let's not begin to rejoice over it. It's little or nothing. It's going to do little or nothing to the FX market. So there's need for more production. All right. So that we boost our FX.
Okay, so I guess if you can tell, have you heard anything about the petrol queues? How is it in your area? Is it official? Are we going to get PMS price increase? I know they had hinted that prices at the depot prices are increasing and all.
Yeah, that is what we're seeing, petrol queue all over the place. And this has become a long-standing issue in Nigeria and had become a reoccurrence. You begin to see that petrol prices are going for almost 800 Naira per litre. And it's important to note that when prices of fundamental commodities like petroleum increase, you are going to begin to see it will create a cycle of rising costs and inflation. And this will have a ripple effect.
All right.
Effect in the sense that it's going to begin to affect transportation costs, cost of production, which will filter into the prices of commodity.
All right.
And become inflationary and
all right, Dr. Ifeoma Nwokolo, Research Manager at Financial Derivatives Company. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's time to head back to the Sunrise Daily studios, but I'll just tell you that yesterday the NGX was almost unchanged, but in the negative, lost about 2 billion naira, and the banks had a lot of profit taking yesterday. Well, not a lot, just 0.39%. Consumer goods was positive, industrial goods is recovered, even though it was marginal. Let's head back now. I'm sure Kayla and I, you are waiting. They have a lot of conversation waiting for you. We'll do it again tomorrow.